P.B. Shelley is credited for coining the proverb, "The wealthy become wealthier and the poor get poorer." Wealth brings more wealth exponentially. This straightforward idea of privilege has contributed to the rising unhappiness with the inequality that has worsened in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak. Wealthier individuals are more likely to see larger returns on their investments, according to research. Additionally, it demonstrates that although affluent people's offspring are likely to inherit that money, they may not have the same high investment returns. Although, it sounds unfair that the rich only get richer and the poor get poorer. Why does such a thing happen? Well, in this video, we are going to discuss the reason behind this. Keep watching to know more as, hopefully, these will be quite helpful for you in the process. Although comprehensive wealth statistics are exceedingly uncommon, 12 years of Norwegian tax records, 2004 to 2015, have provided fresh insight into how people and their kids accumulate money. To avoid inaccuracies from self-reporting, the Nordic nation has a wealth tax that mandates that assets be disclosed by employers, banks, and other third parties. It is also feasible to link parents with their children using the data, which are made publicly available under certain restrictions. According to the statistics, a $1 investment made in 2004 by a person in the 75th percentile of wealth distribution would have generated $1.50 by the end of 2015, representing a 50% return. On the same $1 invested, a person in the top 0.1% would have received a return of $2.40, or 140%, or $2. Another important conclusion is that high returns both push people to the top of the wealth scale and keep them there. Moving from the 10th percentile to the 90th percentile of wealth distribution raises the likelihood of being in the top 1% by 1.2 percentage points, compared to an average probability of 0.89%, controlling for age, parental background, and salary. Why do wealthy individuals get large returns? According to conventional opinion, wealthier people allocate more of their resources to high-risk ventures since they can generate bigger returns. But according to our study, even on more cautious bets, rich investors often get larger returns. Richer people benefit from pure returns to scale as a result of their wealth. Richer people are more likely to have greater risk-adjusted returns for a given portfolio allocation, presumably as a result of their access to more privileged investment possibilities or superior wealth managers. Additionally significant are financial knowledge, financial intelligence, and entrepreneurial skill. The rewards of wealth are enduring throughout time due to these qualities. The first study to quantify this process and demonstrate that it probably matters experimentally is this one. Do high returns withstand generational change? The response is a cautious yes. Although there is a strong intergenerational link between wealth and income, there are significant disparities in how asset returns develop over time. The wealthiest people's offspring will probably be quite wealthy, but they won't likely enjoy the same level of financial success that their parents did. This implies that although money may be passed down properly, outstanding skill cannot. From the years of the COVID pandemic, you may learn. Only the middle class and the poor suffered during the lockdown, becoming more impoverished. However, even if they weren't fully employed then, the wealthy guys continued to become wealthier. According to the Bloomberg Billionaire Index, the net worth of 131 billionaires more than doubled during the epidemic. On December 27, 2022, Bernard Arnault, the head of Louis Vuitton, had a net worth of $159 billion, up almost $60 billion from early 2020. Elon Musk, the second richest person on the globe, had a $139 billion fortune. Before the epidemic, it was less than $50 billion. The third-placed Indian on the index, Gautam Adani, has had his fortune more than tenfold grow over this time, going from around $10 billion at the beginning of 2020 to $110 billion by the end of 2022. By the end of 2021, it is predicted that the global poverty rate would have increased from 7.8 to 9.1%. At the same time, in only 2020, about 97 million people were driven into severe poverty. Today's soaring inflation is harming real wage growth and reducing people's disposable earnings throughout the globe. Many nations use tax rebates and corporate incentives to strengthen economies during emergencies like the epidemic. To make it simpler to lend and spend money, central banks pour money into the economy. This aids affluent people in increasing their fortune via investments in the stock market. Expanding inequality, however, is not inevitable. When the epidemic started, central banks from all across the globe reacted quickly to safeguard financial markets, which suffered greatly as governments imposed tight restrictions. To prevent the economy from imploding, central banks drastically reduced interest rates, which reduced borrowing costs and increased the money supply. Additionally, they poured billions of dollars into financial markets to entice businesses to make economic investments. Since 2020, major central banks have invested more than $11 trillion in the world economy. The value of stocks, bonds, and other financial instruments increased as a result of these measures, but there was no parallel growth in economic output. Francisco Ferreira, director of the International Inequalities Institute at the London School of Economics, told Al Jazeera that a significant portion of the sudden infusion of cash into the financial system, instead of increasing economic output, resulted in a sharp increase in asset prices, including stock prices that benefited the wealthy. With 25 businesses, largely in the technology, electric car, and semiconductor sectors, accounting for 40% of the overall gains, capital markets had increased by $14 trillion. According to Oxfam's Profiting from Pain study, billionaires experienced a rise in their wealth as much as they did in 23 years during the previous 24 months. Nearly 1 million additional individuals fall into poverty every 30 hours as a result of COVID-19 and increasing food costs. Undoubtedly, since the 1980s, when governments all over the globe started deregulating and liberalizing the economy to encourage greater private sector engagement, income and wealth disparities have increased. Wealth disparity relates to the distribution of financial and tangible assets, such as stocks or real estate, between the two categories. Income inequality refers to the gap between the affluent and the poor's disposable income. The post-liberalization era was marked, among other things, by a decline in employees' negotiating strength. At the same time, Yanis Dafirmos, a senior professor in economics at SOAS University of London, said to Al Jazeera, businesses were increasingly resorting to financial markets to borrow money for their investments. For the wealthy, who invest in financial assets, the financialization of the economy, in particular, has created a lot of revenue. Dafirmos said, the central bank's approach to economic crises is to prevent the financial market from collapsing, since it is so closely tied to the actual economy. This promotes the growth of the stock and bond markets, increasing wealth and inequality. Major central banks used a variety of techniques to pump liquidity into the market and decrease interest rates to entice businesses to borrow and invest during the global financial crisis of 2008 to 2009. According to Jayati Ghosh, an economist at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the loose monetary policy that started after the global financial crisis led to exceptionally low to negative interest rates and enormous liquidity in the banking sector. Therefore, instead of growing their output during the previous 15 years, firms preferred to reinvest the money into purchasing additional financial assets in search of high returns. According to Oxfam's Ahmed, the pandemic intensified these systems of inequality, including the liberalization of the labor market, the growth of monopolistic power, and the reduction of public taxes. One such is the fact that 11 nations cut their tax rates on the wealthy throughout the epidemic, while 143 of the 161 countries examined by Oxfam froze them. As nations began to loosen COVID-19 limitations, a strong increase in consumer demand and supply shocks helped push global inflation to historic highs. Because of this, central banks were compelled to end their practices of granting access to cheap credit. Also mentioned were significant increases in interest rates. Currently, their objective is to lower demand to bring down prices, and, in industrialized countries like the United States, to also chill the labor market. Major corporations have begun to announce job layoffs to protect their revenues after this policy change, even if inflation is biting the poor who have low savings rates. Dafirmos said that even when inflation has grown, the profit margins of enterprises have not decreased. According to him, even though smaller businesses are suffering as a result of larger companies' lack of investments, large corporations are keeping their revenues to pay dividends to their shareholders rather than raising wages. Due to their high levels of public and private debt, low-income and developing nations are less able to spend more on social programs as a result of interest rate hikes. Developing nations will face significant pressure to enact austerity measures due to the functioning of the global financial system, De Firmos warned. That might lead to more inequality, and in my opinion, this is arguably more important since it restricts their ability to provide social protection to the underprivileged. According to Oxfam, lower-income nations spent around 27% of their budgets on debt repayment, which is more than twice as much as what they allocated for healthcare and education. That's it for the day, guys. What do you guys think about this? We hope you learned something new today. If you did, let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon. And we'll see you at the next one. Until then, peace.